I should start with introduction. So, hi, I'm Krish. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, specifically in Power BI. I work on real time within Power BI, and that includes things like streaming data flows, the push API, streaming data sets, and that sort of paradigm, including APR. Essentially, how do you bring your data into Power BI, and how do you get it to update frequently enough? Within that, today I'd love to talk to you all about real time in Power BI and how you enable those near real time experiences. So, towards the end of this discussion, what I want people to walk away with is a better understanding of essentially the real time options that exist in Power BI, what the current scenario looks like, what streaming data flows enables, exactly, the near real time scenarios. We'll go through a quick demo of streaming data flows, going through a customer scenario as well. And then I'd love to give you all a sense of the roadmap and the next steps, as well as we have a couple community questions for y'all that we'd love to get a sense of your feedback on. And essentially, if anyone has questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. And we'll definitely pause across the presentation and especially towards the end to have a bit of a community Q&A. And with that, I think we can dive a bit more into real-time and real-time specifically at Power BI. So a big question that I've gotten, especially when I get on client calls, is why is Power BI looking at real-time again? What is this additional emphasis? And a great like point of reference for what's happening here is these two key data points. The first being nearly 30% of the so-called global data sphere will be real-time information within the next 5 years. And another one being that by 2024, it's estimated to be a near $30 billion market. And so these two things in alignment essentially imply the idea that there's a lot of opportunity to be created here and a lot of value that can be provided to the real-time community through Power BI as this tool for that scenario. And so then the key question arises, as in what scenarios do you need real-time information, and who might this work for? And so a good idea of that, or the scenarios that we think are pretty prominent, include a couple on the screen that you see right now. The first being, of course, real-time fraud detection. And I love the example of real-time fraud detection because that's something that I think all of us have come across, that you might get a message from your bank being like, hey, was this really you? And what's happening behind the scenes is that there are millions of transactions going through every second. And so there's a huge time cost to decision making that's happening behind the scenes. And that's where real-time information is so powerful, because a single second here or there, and maybe a fraudulent transaction's been processed. And so there's a real cost implied. And so essentially what's happening is there's a value to decisions being made within a certain time frame. And that's where real-time solutions are powerful. Another one that we see as being pretty impactful and something that we've heard from a lot of customers is the idea of IoT scenarios, specifically for operations and maintenance teams. So you might have scenarios where you have factories that are temperature controlled. They're building certain products, etc. And a slight change in the temperature, and suddenly you've created several items that are no longer optimal for selling on the market, etc. Now, again, like a couple seconds here or there with temperature controls, and you've incurred a slight cost. And so you need to have real-time monitoring from operations teams, looking at several factories, several plants, ensuring that all these controls are kept in line and are kept in check, essentially. And again, there's a cost implied to the time taken to make a decision. And so you see the same sort of like value for a real-time scenario. And of course, there's several others, things like real-time patient monitoring, the idea of customer behavior within stores, which is something we're going to dive into even real-time demand and inventory management, which is actually a good example for the demo that we're going to look at later on as well. And so looking a bit more into these IoT scenarios, I think a good one is phone tracking. And I don't mean that in the dystopian context, but essentially you're walking into a store and you get a contextual ping giving you a sales discount. So that's again a real-time scenario that's enabling value to be created just at the point of purchase. Another one that I'm sure that we've all experienced is the ride-sharing scenario. So things like Uber or Lyft, looking at your location, looking at driver locations, matching them in real time, or even determining driver incentives when there's too much load in a particular location. So you have operations team monitoring locations, coming up with incentives. These are all decisions being made in real time for which you need real-time information. And that's where we think we can add value. Another great one is a marketing scenario, for example, with social media. So something like Twitter, let's say you have a product demo going on and you're able to analyze in a real-time scenario how people are consuming this information, reacting to it, the general perception around the product, etc. So again, there's a lot of scenarios that get enabled with the ability to look at information in real time or near real-time scenarios. And that's what we're really excited about for the next couple of years. And so going from that into what exists today, it's a pretty interesting paradigm. So you have two options today if you want to bring your data into Power BI. There's the streaming data set and there's a push data set. So with streaming data set, they're incredibly responsive, close to 1 second in latency. You have really nice visuals with streaming tiles on dashboards, very fluid, but data retention is quite short. So it's just 60 minutes. So you have this ability to get data really fast, but you can't retain it for too long. So it might be great for key decision makers in that moment to look at data, but it renders you unable to look at data in aggregation. So for business makers, a level or two away from the key real-time scenario, they're unable to enjoy from that data as well. And then on the other hand, you have push data sets. So they're a little slower with 3 to 5 seconds in terms of responsiveness, but your data retention there is far higher, right? So you have 5 million rows per table or 200,000 if you use the basic FIFO retention policy. It doesn't, of course, have the same streaming tile visuals, et cetera, but it does work with all the other report visuals that exist. So the key question arises here, which is, can there be something that brings the goodness of a streaming data set with the speed that has, but allows you the long-term retention to look at this data in aggregation over a certain time period? And that's essentially where we want to bring in streaming data flows. So streaming data flows essentially enables a low-code, no-code experience. It handles both hot and cold storage for your data, allowing you to do real-time and historical analyses, as well as it allows real-time reports to be made with every single Power BI visualization that we have today. And looking into this further, what is streaming data flows, how you can create one, and what do we support with streaming data flows? So it's essentially the ability, again, to bring in your data, ingest it, mash up, model, and build reports based on the streaming data and real-time data directly on the Power BI service. You can do this through a really friendly UI view, which we will go through in the demo later on. At the end of this, what ends up getting created is essentially a data flow artifact that is consuming this real-time information, and it's putting it, and you can connect it right into Power BI to enable real-time reporting. Further on from that, how this gets connected is through, it also supports direct query and APR. So now your data through streaming data flows is getting piped into a Power BI managed store, for example, within 1 to 3 seconds. And then you're able to use APR to update close to like every 3 to 4 seconds. So you were able to enable those real-time scenarios pretty easily. And looking into the stats a bit more, as I mentioned, you're able to look at a responsiveness that is between a streaming data set and a push data set with a data retention that is far longer than that of a push data set. What that enables is even more aggregated views, allowing you to look at, instead of just maxing out at where a push data set would, especially for IoT scenarios where you have a lot of data coming in, down to every second. We have better ingestion rates as well. And we work with every visual type that exists on Power BI today. So that's really exciting in terms of what's being enabled, where this exists within that streaming real-time paradigm as well. And to give you a sense of what the higher level overview looks like today. So today we support event hubs, Azure IoT hubs. We have support for Azure Blob. We're looking at expanding support to other connectors as well, like Twitter, etc. What you do is you ingest this into a low-code, no-code UI that we'll go through, and that directly and that handles the outputting of data to both a hot and cold storage. So both a real-time and historical data set. And then you can ingest that straight into Power BI using the connectors that already exist today. And so moving on from that then, there's the quick demo. But before I do that, I want to quickly pause and just see if there's any questions from the community. Greg, is there anything that you want to highlight right now?
Not seeing any questions. I think we're just seeing some comments on community members that are doing real-time data streaming, which is amazing, and some of the use cases. So onwards.
Okay, awesome. And so I'm just gonna quickly pause and then try to share my screen. Awesome. Let me know if you guys can see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, actually,
so
I do have a question. Can I interrupt? Sorry, it's can you just say a little bit about the difference between how it captures hot and cold, how it does historical at the same time? Or are you going to show that?
When you say explain how it captures that, could you
It's just that, I'm just looking at your graphic, the low code to no the streaming data flows to hot real-time data and cold historical data. I'm trying to think, well, how does that work? Does it get stored in a warehouse somewhere? I mean, what, so maybe it's not possible to sort of just say it in an elevator pitch, but that's what
For sure. So I will go through in the demo. We're going to see how you set that all up.
Okay.
Essentially, under the hood, it's setting up like a SQL store and then also a data lake for you. That's all being managed under the hood, so that's not something that you're interacting with, but I'll show you how we go through that process for sure.
Great.
And if I don't completely answer that towards the end of the demo, feel free to interject and just let me know if you have questions at that point. That's totally fair.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, so giving context on what we're seeing right now, we're in a workspace. It's a premium workspace. So Streaming Dataflows is currently for premium workspaces. So you come in, the way you'd create one is you go to plus new, and then you'd see Streaming Dataflow on the dropdown. And you just click on that, and then that would be enabled. So I've already created one. Let's use the super user demo for right now. And then we'll go here. And as you see, it's a low-code, no-code UI, very easy editor. You see the connections right here. You're able to see the transformations that you can use right here. And then you can use an output table. And that's essentially, once you connect it to an output table, under the hood, it's setting up both the hot and cold storage for you. And so I'm going to use an event hub. I've already got one set up. And what you do is we have a learn more link, and then if you clicked on this, it would show you how to get an event hub connection string, but I already have one, so let me just paste that in. So if you have an event hub connection string, you just put that in, and now it's going to show you an error. And the reason it's doing that is because it's not detected the fields yet. And so as you can see, there's also a data preview issue, like you can't see anything yet. So what you do is you hit auto detect fields, and boom, you can now start previewing your data, and you can see what's coming in. So before I dive into other stuff, let me explain the data that we're seeing. So the scenario that we've created for today's demo is essentially, let's say you're creating a dashboard for a sales engineer working in a retailer. and it's Black Friday. So this person owns a particular product group, let's say it's pants, and they have all the SKUs within pants. So that could be like you own black pants, denims, all the different varieties. And this is for North America, let's say more specifically the US and Canada. So you have this data coming in, it's coming into your Azure Event Hub, and you've just taken a connection string and consumed that right here. And so you can see the product UID, product group, you can see the SKU, you can see the distribution center location, you can see where it got bought. So we're here, and again, there's still an error. So what it's actually saying is that you need to connect it to an output string. And so we're here, let's say we want to manipulate the data somehow. So we want to manage fields. And what this lets you do is it'll let you pick and choose the fields that you actually want to filter for. So let's say at this stage that we're at, we want to just look at, we just want to look at the SKU of a particular product. So I'd go here and I would just add one field, and I'd select field and I'd take SKU, and that would be it. But still at this point, it's asking you, hey, you still need to set this up. And the reason that that's saying that is because you need to connect it to something. And so this chain essentially requires itself to be completed. And so let's connect that to an output table. So we're here, we'll connect it to an output table. And let's say it's super user demo. So we're here, we've connected it to an output table, and we have to save that. Okay, so we're here. And now what we can do is we can just see out here. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, so we can select the particular field that we're looking at, and we have to save that. So let's save this. Great. And now you can see that it's taking in this input and it's saying we're only going to give you a SKU, and it's connected it to an output table that's called super user demo. But out here, we still can't see anything, right? And that's because you have to hit get static preview when you go through your transformations. So once it's done loading, exactly, now as you can see here, now we're able to see that it is in fact getting in this particular SKU, and it's outputting it to a super user demo table. And so I would just hit save in this context. And once I do that, this entire thing, this Dataflow, the streaming Dataflow has been saved. And if I went back, I'd have my super user demo here. I could hit play and this would start streaming. And so we've already got one set up that does essentially the same thing. And now I'm going to show you all a Power BI dashboard that's already consuming the data flow that we just set up. So you have a data flow, we just pipe that in, and we're now consuming it. I know there's a lot going on the screen, so I totally understand the confusion there, and I'm just going to break that down. But essentially, the way you'd go about consuming this is you'd go to get data, and you just consume it through a Power Platform data flow. I'm not going to go through that right now, since that does take a quick minute or two. But you can go through this yourself, and we do have a walkthrough on this for this on our site. So now you're on this report, and you're trying to create a report for this particular individual. So let's see all the different things you can do with the streaming data flow. So on one hand, you're able to see real-time sales happening in every location. You're able to see the sales happening in Canada, the sales happening in the US. In addition to this, you're able to see on-hand inventory. So if you recall the scenario I mentioned early on about real-time inventory management, this is where it becomes key, because you need to know how much inventory you have on hand for this particular product that you're trying to sell. Another one that's really interesting is, let's say this is an e-commerce website, and now you're able to track, in addition to the inventory you have on hand, the amount of items that are currently in customer baskets for each SKU. The reason that's important in this context is, I mean, the more of a particular item that's in a basket, if you just ran a sale at this point, you might incur a certain loss, since people might still be buying it at the higher price. You're also able to see when was the last time you changed prices for this particular product for the individual SKU as well. In addition to that, you're also able to see real-time sales volumes on the website. So how much you're selling for that particular product on the site. And then there's also personal metrics. So you might create a report that's also telling the salesperson the numbers they've hit. So have they met their targets? This person clearly has. Have they met their, in dollar terms, the amount of money they should have made by the end of the day? This may or may not be the case right now. And so, as you can see, with a real-time report and with streaming data flows, you're able to leverage both streaming and APR connected through DQ and create this really powerful report that's updating down to almost every second and allowing real operations people to make real-time decisions that actually have monetary impact. And so that's what we find so exciting about this new streaming paradigm that we're putting into place through streaming data flows right now. Yeah, so this is essentially the example. Again, I'm going to take a quick pause. If there's any questions about the report you're looking at, or even about the the editor experience that you just saw. I'm just going to pause for a second. I can't see chat right now, so Greg, could you help me out?
I see Chris raise his hand. Chris, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure. So did you said get data from, was it streaming data flows as the source? So it's a new source in the get data option.
Yeah, so if I could go back, then if you went to get data,
yeah.
Let's see. So the reason I don't want to trigger this is because this is sometimes a bit slow on presentations, but you just go to Power BI data flows.
Okay, it's not a new data flow.
No, it's the same one. You just go to Power Platform, Power BI data flows, you hit connect, and then you just see it. Don't want to trigger it right now just because that might take a bit, but that's essentially what you need to do. And we have a complete walkthrough of this on our site for the documentation. I'll be adding that in the chat as well later.
Are all the Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So are all the capabilities of building a data set still available with this after you've done the get data to data flows?
Yeah, I don't think you're locked away from anything else. You can still add like additional reports. Like I have some of this coming in from an Excel document as well.
Got it.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing I was mentioning is I see data flows and then Power BI data flows. Is there a difference there?
Yeah, it's something that we're deprecating and moving out, or moving to Power BI data flows. This is just like an in-transit thing. If you went to our site and you looked at the documentation, it would clearly tell you to use this.
Cool.
Yeah.
Look at the documentation always.
Yeah, always. Big fans of the documentation here. And so as you can see, this was, I think somebody asked me this before, which was how does the whole Datastore Management stuff work? It's really easy because all you had to do here was just connect it to an output table. And this automatically set up both hot and cold storage for you. So then when you connected to this on the report, you'd see both options. You can just choose which one you want to pick. So if you just hot data, you can then use direct query on it and then like do the data manipulation stuff that you saw in the report. But as you can see, it's like something that would previously take teams weeks or months to figure out and a lot of money to invest in. We've now just created a really simple low-code, no-code experience, allowing even citizen analysts to essentially create like really powerful flows. As long as you have data getting piped in somewhere, you can now consume it and put it out.
Is there any relation between the connectivity to Azure storage that exists in regular data flows? Like if you're using a workspace that's connected or a tenant that's connected to Azure storage, does that have any impact?
Not that I'm aware of. That I'm aware of. But if you do come across any issues, like feel free to reach out and just let us know. It's a pretty connected world, so if there is some sort of like, offshoot that we haven't covered yet, just let us know and we'll look into it as well.
And there's no relation to CDM folders. This is completely different. Is that right?
Yeah. When you say that, what do you mean?
The data flows typically are stored in data lake as CDM folders, if I understand correctly. Whereas this streaming data flow, there's no storage. Can we get in and kind of hack the thing this thing stores in Azure storage, or is it just invisible to us as part of Power BI?
Yeah, it's kind of managed by Power BI, so it's not something that we're exposing right now. Of course, like that's something that we're aware of and we're trying to always like increase functionality. This is in public preview right now. I should mention that. So, we're Yeah, early days.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And then really quickly, Kishore, did you have something you wanted to add or ask?
Yes. Hey, Krish, in the same super user demo, you did mention about the storage being automatically created, right? So are there any plans, like for instance, at our org, we do everything on-prem, for instance. So is there a plan to use the last leg to store data on local databases?
Yeah, we're definitely aware of the BYOS scenario where clients, if you have on-prem, you'd like to store it there. That's definitely part of our roadmap. I'm going to cover that in a bit. But yes, that is, we're aware of that scenario. We're working towards it. We're definitely looking at trying to enable that if we can. Right now, it's all managed within the Power BI system, though.
Mm-hmm. The other question I had was like, how much volume can this handle at a given point of time?
So we have an ingestion rate of 1 Mbps. Beyond that, there's no real cap on it. We don't have like you saw with the, I think with push data sets, there's a definite storage cap on how much we're able to store. But with streaming data flows, my apologies, we don't really set any hard restrictions on that.
So if someone like us trying to implement a streaming related workflows like this, do we have to be worried because we have a limited on-prem processing and storage capacity? I mean,
this would use, so as I mentioned, this actually leverages the premium capacity that organizations have. The way that we're able to enable this is it is a premium feature. So there's no real restriction on our end. It just uses your premium capacity that you've already paid for.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Will this be a new workload in the premium that you can manage with settings?
Yeah, so you're able to go in, when you say a workload that you can manage, do you just mean like
within the premium capacity? There's like a dataset workload, a Dataflows workload. Is this going to be an additional workload that's configurable in premium?
Sure. So if you went in here and you went to premium, do you mean somewhere out here?
I mean in the Power BI admin.
Okay.
The capacity admin role.
Okay, that's a great question. So I believe right now it would come under the Dataflows sort of workload because under the hood, it's essentially a data flow that's being created. But if there, I can definitely talk to my engineering team and double check on that. But I do believe it's going to be a Dataflow workload.
Okay. And is this certifiable? Can you have a certified or uncertified? Is there metadata that you can configure for that?
No, not right now.
Okay.
No, we don't have certified. No.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then lastly, Krish, Dimitri asked, are there any ingress charges to be careful about?
When you say that, do you mean if you're trying to bring in data from like AWS, etc.?
Let's say I'm pushing data through an event hub and coming into the data center. Besides the event hub charges per packet or event, is there anything else to be careful about?
So okay. So if I understand correctly, you're saying if you're piping data to event hub from somewhere, is there any additional cost that you might incur just because you're doing a streaming data flow? No.
Yes.
As long as that data is coming into event hub, there's no then it's just within our ecosystem. So then that's fine.
Okay, so whatever other system charges are used to put IoT data into our environment, those charges will still apply, but anything doing here has no extra cost.
No, there's no ingress out here, right? Because it's just within, currently we just have are exposing it to just Azure internal services. So there's no ingress cost here.
Okay.
Just the premium cost.
Just the premium.
Just checking.
Yes.
So does that mean it's not premium per user?
No, it does. So because even if you had PPU, you'd still have a premium workspace, right?
Okay.
And so essentially this is just like on the workspace and then,
Got it. Cool.
And I think I read somewhere that there might be a per user premium without going through the full premium package?
Yeah, that's PPU.
PPU, and would it be available through there also?
Yes, because if you had PPU, you'd still you would be able to enable a premium workspace, and this is enabled for premium workspaces.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And so if there's no further questions for this, for the editor and stuff, I'd love to hop back into the slides. Is that fine?
I just have one more question. This is more
Sure.
of an impact on design. So let's say you have a data set which has, you know, daily or weekly data, and then you want to stream in like the most recent data. Can you blend data that's import? So in import mode, can you blend like a table, almost do like a union of the imported data plus the streaming data? Can you do that?
I think you might struggle because if you do import, I don't believe APR works in that scenario. So
Okay.
I don't think you would be able to do that too well because the APR would block that then.
Okay.
But you could try to do it at a, but there is a scenario. So if we go back here, so I definitely have Excel in this paradigm. Like, so this pricing history stuff is just an Excel sheet I took in. So I think it might be able to work, but let me look into that a bit more.
Okay.
If you want to talk or follow up after this as well, I'd be happy to work with you on your particular scenario.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Loving all the questions, Chris. Way to keep them honest.
Great demo.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, cool. So let me just hop back into the slides then, and then we can go from there. So let me represent in Teams. And we're back to where we began. So, okay, so we just got done with the demo. And now in terms of roadmap, and I think we've definitely discussed a bit of this. So what do the next 6 months look like for us? We're definitely looking at adding support for more connectors. So things like Twitter, etc. Support for linked entities. So that's the ability to connect a data flow to a streaming data flow, or vice versa, or even a streaming to streaming, etc. Support for BYOS, like somebody mentioned right now. That's pretty important. We've heard that, and we're trying to look at that as well. And as well as support for more transformations. So we saw the ability to manage fields, the ability to filter, etc. We're looking at additional transformations that can possibly enable newer experiences for people. And so that's what our roadmap looks like right now. Before I go on to next steps, etc., we definitely had some questions for the community. So please feel free to drop the replies for these either on chat or just unmute yourselves and speak as well. That's fine. The first one that we're looking at is at least helping us understand what the most common use cases that you might have for streaming data flows, maybe within your organizations.
Come on, y'all, don't be bashful.
We have tons of event hubs set up, and I see it as an opportunity to we're doing it mostly for log kind of archiving to our SIEM, and we're spending a lot of money to use the event hubs, but we're not doing any analytics off them. So it's an opportunity to say, well, we got all those things flowing. Maybe we can be plugging these in. So it's more exploratory to see what options exist.
For sure, that makes sense. But then, what are the scenarios or what are the experiences that this is enabling today that maybe aren't possible for you right now? I guess that's what we're trying to get a sense of as well, right? Because there are workarounds, etc.
I don't know yet.
For sure. We're seeing some really interesting comments on the chat as well. So manufacturing device data, that's interesting.
That's been one that, I know we've had even a project on as well, using Azure Event Hub. It's a really strong use case, IoT data, uptime, being able to, remote monitoring in manufacturing. I see operation support for transit companies, that's also, I think, kind of part and parcel with that, kind of closely related. I really like the people badging in and out of an office. I think that's like a low-hanging fruit type use case. It's like, hey, who's in this building? You know, who's actually in the office right now?
Yeah, for sure. Especially right now, especially in this particular environment.
Yeah, the hybrid work environment where who knows if you're just working from home or if you're at the office, where people are at.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
like healthcare clients, real-time urgent care patient needs, waiting room data. I think somebody earlier in the chat today was talking about how they have live streaming for, you know, beds at the bedside as well in a healthcare setting.
Oh, that's interesting. I've heard a lot of the IoT scenarios, but the healthcare ones I haven't heard a lot of. So this is really great feedback to hear about. Of course, the time to refill coffee pot is another big one. So love that scenario.
Kishore, I think it was Kishore that was mentioning the healthcare setting. Kishore, do you want to either come off mute or maybe elaborate?
Yeah, so we have like a lot of bedside data coming in from a couple of different devices. One, we use like two different types of devices right now. By bedside, for bedside monitoring, we use Philips, and then we also use what's the other one? I always forget. Um, we also use Capsule. Uh, So Capsule doesn't have its own database or anything, so it actually constantly streams. Those devices stream HL7 data, and then we use NiFi to bring in that HL7 data. Or we also have Ensemble on our side, uh, and we have a separate team for that integration team who does that too, based on the use case, of course. And then for the Philips, I mean, it comes with its own DB, so we can actually stream from there. And of course, we use a similar mechanism, either Kafka or Spark streaming, um, or something like that. So basically, we bring it into our big data platform and then stream data off of there into the Power BI. So we use the data coming from the bedside devices. Right now, we're using uh, some of the data to um, understand how the patient's kidneys are performing, for instance, if there's an elevated activity or things like that. We also have some data coming from neuro devices. So basically, if you go to hospital, you'll see some kids with electrodes uh, uh, on their heads. So basically, we're trying to monitor some of that data as well. We're still in the process of building the machine learning models for those to understand different um, patterns and see what's normal and what's not, so that we can predict what's going on. On the other side, on the hospital side, we also have staffing related information that's coming in. I saw someone also mention that here, waiting room data, for instance. It's not exactly the waiting room data that we're looking at. We're looking at like the flow of the patients, of course, whether it's from ED or direct admissions, anything like that. And then based on the traffic that we see, we tend to predict what's the staffing needs, uh, the, what the staffing needs look like next couple of hours or 4 hours. So right now we're like able to predict almost with 96, I think 96 or 97% accuracy on how much staffing is needed, for instance. That's a little more mature model. So we do have a bunch of other use cases, like we're a big hospital, so with that comes a lot of challenges, like monitoring air quality or other factors, because we also have gases coming into the operation rooms and things like that, right? So that makes it really critical to monitor some of that information. So which of course has to be streamed. So Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's actually, it's a lot of food for thought. Thank you for the detail there as well. I appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks.
Okay. So I think going from that, and I again love the fact that so many people just mentioned a lot of these interesting scenarios as well. Traffic monitoring looks pretty interesting. I think for your scenarios, in terms of the individual components that we showed y'all, could you, and please feel free to either comment this out loud or mention this in the chat. Could you just order in terms of usefulness what the individual components would look like for you? So if there's Event Hub integration, IoT Hub, blob storage, near real-time updates, or was it the drag and drop ETL? Or was it something entirely different that was particularly appealing to you or for your scenarios?
Where's the all the above? I don't see the all the above.
No, we're trying to get a ranking out here.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
See drag and drop ETL, blob storage integration being high priority. I think the whole drag and drop piece being closer and closer towards Alteryx parity.
Yeah.
What does near real-time updates mean? Is that the report view, or is that the data
So
flow
you're
view?
essentially able to go from the event hub getting like the event getting emitted to it getting stored into your essentially getting stored in your managed storage services within 1 to 3 seconds. And then that just depends on your APR, how frequently you're checking, because your report would get updated pretty quickly from there as well. But that's like the entire pipeline is going from, 4 to 5 seconds you might have for like a push data set to like 1 to 3. So pretty close to what a streaming data set has today.
Any other comments?
Okay, yeah. So then the other one was the capabilities, I guess. So this is a question that we're thinking a lot about is what are the capabilities from Streaming Dataflow that might be required or you'd like to see an increase in adoption in your organization?
I'm gonna say this tongue in cheek. Make it available on pro licensing.
That is something that we're looking at. So, trying to see how we can enable more of this. But yeah.
Chris just mentioned that event hub and blob storage.
Awesome.
From the last question.
And I think somebody mentioned, sorry.
I was just I actually had a real-time conversation with one of my key users recently, and he said we're probably going to need more real-time, and I went deeper into the conversation, and it actually was a little bit more of a human factors type of thing, where an executive may be looking at a report and seeing a data quality issue, and they want to get a sales rep to, hey, you got to go update your Salesforce. You need to update this dirty data that's messing up our report. They go change it, and they shouldn't have to wait for a day. So some of it relates to the ETL architecture. If it's everything is batch daily, that's not going to really function. But having the ability to just flow the changes more quickly, it's just an example. This technology doesn't solve it. It's dependent on the upstream, but I just wanted to describe that as sort of one thing our users are craving in Power BI is a little less of the slowness of kind of the import and the refresh pattern. And some of that also relates to there's tremendous amount of use of Microsoft 365. So, they like to go in and have 20 different refresh schedules, every half hour basically. But to be able to have closer real time of some of their manual data sets, so it's you can refresh a report and it's just coming directly live kind of from the Excel out there, is even though it's not the best architecture, it still is heavily used. So just wanted to add that.
Interesting. So you mentioned, so are you saying the scenario that is tempting is the ability to tap into Excel in terms of a live format, or is it just the the data getting piped in really fast, so you're able to make even business level decisions at a more great.
In the self-service realm of Power BI, there's still a lot of manual data that gets blended into the centralized sources.
That's true.
And some of them crave that to be less of a batch refresh and more of I just want to see in this report the same thing I'm seeing when I open up Excel Online or a SharePoint list, things like that.
Okay, so yeah, I understand what you're talking about. Yeah, that's definitely, that would be interesting to see. But would that be, you're saying that would be an adoption driver then, if you could do something like that with Streaming Dataflow, or is that just like a separate thing entirely?
It would enrich the Power BI experience to maybe simplify away from some of the complexity of them needing to do refreshes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. So going on from there then, in terms of next steps, if you guys are interested in trying this stuff out for yourself, you can head over to powerbi.com. And as I showed you, if you have a premium workspace, just create your first streaming data flow. You can check out the documentation. That's really up to date, and that shows you, again, like we mentioned, things like the connector issue, etc. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to use any of the channels that we have today, either the community or if you're part of the user/enterprise voice programs, things like that. We'd love to hear from y'all and how you want to see this feature evolve. I'd schedule some time on the back end of this for any cute questions the community might have. If you guys have anything else you might want to ask, I know we did this a bit during the demo as well. But if you have any other questions that you might want to address right now, please feel free to ask them. I'd love to help answer that or connect you to somebody who might be the best person to talk to about this problem.
Can I ask you a bit more about permissioning and kind of what permissions are related to using this, not only from the data flow perspective, but also from the Event Hub perspective? So you're going to put in the connection string to the Event Hub, but are those users using it going to need to be permissioned in Azure on that Event Hub? Kind of what's the surface area for securing these as they're used across an organization?
That makes sense. So the question, as I understand it, is, hey, if I created an Event Hub and I gave you a connection string, but you didn't have maybe access to my Event Hub, could you take that connection string, put that into your streaming data flow, and then consume data from my Event Hub? Correct?
That's part of it. And then also in the Power BI side, can we do sort of sharing of the streaming data flow across workspaces, so you can have one that's shared across workspaces?
When you say shared across workspaces, could you explain what that means?
So if you have like right now, if you have a data flow, you can store it and then you can you refresh it on a regular basis. And then if it's reused in other workspaces, you can just have that one and you don't have to have it added in every workspace.
It's one of the main use cases of data flows is the ability to go across workspaces, because currently, like Datasets, I mean, until shared datasets came, that was a big miss. But
right, so just so I understand, like because I'm thinking this is so linked to the linked entity scenario, but just so that I can clarify that. Okay,
it is related to that. Yeah.
So that's. Sorry.
And let me just ask a question again. Let's say you have a particular Event Hub and you want to share it across, let's say, 50 workspaces. What would the pattern look like as that's deployed? Would each workspace have to go and register that, be a premium workspace? Well, obviously, they'll have to be premium workspaces, but would each one have to register that connection to the Event Hub, or can you do it once and sort of just share it across the workspaces?
But how that, okay, explain to me, at least I'm trying to understand what that flow looks like. Because if it is the linked entity scenario, then that's something we're trying to enable. It's like actually an issue that we're trying to solve through. But if it's not, then that's like, because I'm assuming it's like a shallow copy that you're making of something that exists in one workspace so that you're able to like leverage it across other things. That's not something we have today. But yeah, that's sort of linked to the whole linked entity, like dealing with linking one streaming data flow to another, linking a streaming data flow to a data flow itself. Yeah, there's just issues with like change management that we're dealing with that we're trying to like figure out. But yeah, like that's something that, yeah, I think the linked entity scenarios, I would think covering what you're describing, and that's something we're working towards.
Got it. Cool. And then for the Event Hub permissioning, that's just an Azure permission then that those.
Yeah, because I think what's happening under the hood is it's actually checking your authentication. And so then it's just like matching that and seeing if you're part of the authenticated group.
Okay.
So I can double check the details on that, but I do believe that that's what's happening under the hood in terms of permissioning.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So then I had a couple of quick questions. If you can hear me, I don't know if my headphone's working properly.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. I'm trying to get my team, my group, my company to go over to Power BI. So in terms of being able to use some of the what do you call it? Not Premiere, but
Premium?
Premium.
elevated the elevated level of permissions where you can do different things if you have a subscription. Is there some way of making that happen where I can test that out for them and show them without having those specific permissions, or do you have to have that subscription level to do that?
Do you mean, is there a free trial available for premium? That would
Yes,
okay.
I'm not sure why I couldn't just said that, but anyway,
No,
that's what I mean.
no, sir, you're totally fine. I was just clarifying for my own
No
understanding.
worries.
I think I'm not aware about the free trial dynamics for premium, but I know we have PPU. So if you have a pro license, premium per user is a couple dollars more.
Okay.
And so you can just test that out and then like sort of like leverage that for like an easy first trial initial user experience sort of scenario.
Okay.
So there are some instances that we've had, I've worked with the Microsoft rep and they've been able to provide like a month up to 2 months of like premium capacity for kind of like testing purposes. That's usually saved for like enterprise customers. I don't know where you work, but if that is something you want to reach out to me for, I could possibly help out. But to Krish's point, the Power BI Premium per user is the most economical way to kind of kick the tires if you're not within that kind of enterprise account level.
Hey, Greg, I'm using a free one right now.
Huh.
Yeah. It happens. Where do you work?
I got Kaiju's Technology.
I know it's a month-long PPU option, but it's just for a month, 30 days.
Gotcha. And that's when you get, I know like with the Pro, if it's like your first time on Pro, they'll also give you PPU as well. Like you just get both of them, like automatically.
Okay. I'll have to make a note of that. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If your admins have it enabled, there's a way to disable that too. So if your Power BI admin has the trial capabilities enabled. So another option too is if you do have an Azure, I mean, everybody kind of has an Azure tenant if they're on Microsoft 365, you can use the embedded capacity to create a capacity and attach it to a workspace if you have a pro licenses. So you can use that to try it as well without committing to a full premium license.
Okay, I'll have to let the IT team know that.
Yeah.
And okay, and then I had this is probably like it'll be out of release number 25, but imagine in the pipeline, because this is sort of the issue that I have. Is this possible, or is this maybe coming down the line where you showed that dashboard was really handy, and it's sort of like each team or each department had specific data that they had to look at? In that pipeline scenario, can people that I have different teams and different groups put their own data into that pipeline and then feed it? Do you know what I'm saying? And as opposed to one individual BI administrator or person doing that. Does that make sense? Is that thought about? Is that in the future? Can I do that? Because this is a problem. I have people coming in with Excel. I have people coming in with Tableau, blah blah blah, and then being able to get all of those into a pipeline and then have a dashboard created. is sort of the end goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to say is within the editor experience on service, if you would be able to have multiple collaborators add different data sources and then like kind of
Correct.
merge that. Well, to that point, so we don't have support for actually Tableau and those sort of connectors today on streaming data flows.
Okay.
But more specifically for the collaboration sort of experience, we don't, if you are not the owner of the streaming data flow, and I believe today only if you own the workspace can you actually enable or create a streaming data flow, you are able to stop and start a data flow and possibly view it, but you're not allowed to edit it. And so,
okay.
yeah, so it's not designed right now for a multi-user collaborative experience. It's more, hey, you can spin up a workspace. Maybe you have a premium workspace, and then you can like create a streaming data flow there. But not particularly for multiple people kind of working there and like adding more. Just because we are aware and cognizant of the premium, the fact that it's consuming premium capacity. So this is just a challenge that we're trying to work through and just figure out how we can enable that and still make sure that, all your premium capacity just doesn't get like consumed through the roof like within a month.
Okay, thanks. And I'm not recruiting for Power BI people, but if anybody, I'm sorry, just real quick, I'm going to put my company name in the chat. And if you go to our website and you see any jobs that you're interested, please let me know and I can connect you with the right recruiter. So especially if you have a national clearance, security clearance, we have a whole bunch of jobs open for positions like that. So sorry to interrupt. That's my.
Please drop it in there. That's
yeah.
great.
Hang on, I'm going to put it in right now.
Usually during our introductions, we kind of do like, hey, who's hiring and who's got positions open. But glad you jumped in with that.
Yeah, no worries. It's there. It's Cayuse Technologies is how you say it. And we're in East Oregon, but if you look at the jobs, you'll see they're all over the nation. So, cool. Yeah. And awesome. This is, I don't know if you guys can see I'll put my email in there too. And then if anybody needs to contact me.
Love Pendleton. Pendleton Roundup.
Yes. He knows. Oh, that's right. I think I talked to you about that before, maybe. Yes, the Roundup. If you like cowboys and horses and cows and chickens, Pendleton's the place for you. But there's like I live 30 miles the other way towards civilization, but they're all over. So here's my email if I can spell it right.
That's great. While you do that, I'll give everybody else a chance. Any other questions for Krish? Comments?
Great introduction.
Yes, great introduction. It was very helpful, knowledgeable.
Well, if I think we're at that wrapping up stage, I would love if y'all either come off mute, show your video, let's give a loud round of applause for Krish joining us and just giving such an awesome introduction to streaming data flows. Great capability. Thank you, Krish.